I know some people are going to think I'm crazy because of this. Many people already do think I'm crazy, but I just want to put it out there for the internet. By 2030, 95% of energy generation worldwide will be renewable. 95% of the entire global car market will be electric. Hydrogen will be finished. And so, for that matter, will be oil. The age of oil will be over. Now, I know this sounds very early, 2030, but that's what I think will happen. And I've done the numbers on it, and I have good reason for thinking that will happen. One of those reasons is the insane cost declines of solar. Solar has decreased in price by 89% over the past decade. But over the past 70 years, it's declined in price by an order of magnitude more than that. Kristen Toussaint reports for Fast Company that the price of solar electricity has dropped by 89% in 10 years. In 2009, building a new solar farm was 223% more expensive than building a new coal plant. Now that has flipped. To curb our climate crisis, we need to end our dependence on fossil fuels and power the world with renewables. That may have seemed far-fetched a decade ago, given the cost of installing wind and solar at the time, but the price of renewables has been falling fast. In 10 years, the price of solar electricity dropped 89%, and the price of onshore wind dropped 70%. Clean energy has already passed its economic tipping point. A 2019 report from the non-profit Rocky Mountain Institute found that it was cheaper to build and use a combination of renewables like wind and solar than to build new natural gas plants. A 2020 report from Carbon Tracker found that in every single one of the world's energy markets, it's cheaper to invest in renewables than to continue running existing coal plants. And now, graphs published recently on Our World in Data, an online science publication, in partnership with Oxford University, starkly visualize that decline. Comparing the price of electricity from new power plants in 2009 and 2019, one graph shows how the price of solar photovoltaic power from solar panels plummets from $359 per megawatt hour to $40 per megawatt hour, the cheapest of any of the power options on the chart, and an 89% decrease. If housing prices decline to that same rate, Our World in Data researcher Max Rosa writes, a home that cost $3,590 to rent in 2009 would cost just $400 in 2019. Over the same time period, the price of coal barely budged, from $111 per megawatt hour in 2009 to $109 in 2019. In 2009, building a new solar farm was 223% more expensive than building a new coal plant. Now it's flipped. Electricity from a new coal plant is 177% more expensive than electricity from new solar panels. What caused the switch? Huge leaps in technological advancement. To understand why solar power got so cheap, we have to understand why solar technology got cheap, Rosa writes. The first instances of solar tech weren't affordable at all. In 1965, the first price point for usable solar tech Rosa found in his research, 1 watt cost $1,865 in 2019 prices. Though homeowners weren't shelling out that much for power from solar panels then, the technology did end up being used for satellites. And like with other technologies, the more something is produced, the cheaper and easier it becomes to produce. It's a virtuous cycle. It's thanks to that initial demand in the high-tech sector of satellites, Rosa writes, that we learned cheaper ways to produce solar modules. From 1976 to 2019, the cost of photovoltaic modules, a solar panel, dropped from $106 per watt to 38 cents per watt. $106 per watt to 38 cents per watt. Once solar hit scale, it started having its own supply chain, and the module itself got a lot cheaper, says David Feldman, a senior financial analyst at the US Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And with that scale, there was more research and development. The technology itself continued to improve in terms of efficiency, reliability, longevity, and other ways too. So there are all these other things in addition to scaling up. This learning by doing helped lower the cost of installation and building for solar systems too. With expanded capacity, the price of solar electricity, not just solar tech, also drops. Another Our World in Data graph shows how as we build more solar farms and renewable capacity goes up, the price of that renewable energy goes down. In 2010, with fewer than 50,000 megawatts of solar installed, a megawatt hour of solar electricity cost $378. In 2019, with more than 500,000 megawatts installed, that price drops to $68. Just imagine what the price will drop to by 2030. If we follow this existing scale of cost declines, the price will drop to below $10. This effect is not true for coal. In the same time period, even as coal capacity increased, the cost of coal electricity dropped by just 2%. Coal is not getting cheaper, and Rosa notes there's no reason to believe that it will in the future. It comes down to how renewable versus fossil fuel plants operate. For coal, gas, and nuclear power plants, there are two factors that affect price: the current cost of that fuel and the plant's operating costs. Renewables like wind and solar don't need to pay for fuel, so the only cost is in building and maintaining the technology. For a coal plant, the cost of the coal it burns accounts for 40% of that plant's total costs. All power plants that rely on non-renewable sources of energy will have this continual expense, even if the technology to build the plants gets cheaper. Meanwhile, the price of renewables could continue to decrease. There's still a lot of opportunity for continued cost reduction, Fieldman says. And there are certainly a lot of areas around the world and in the US that don't have a large amount of solar. So there still are a lot of opportunities for further market penetration. Examples for this: India, Australia, Africa, Southeast Asia, Indonesia. There are many countries in the world that have nowhere near the solar capacity that they can generate. Nowhere near. Since solar energy is produced right when the sun is shining, some systems will need lots of battery storage to allow for flexible energy use. Fortunately, as storage scales, it too will become cheaper. Imagine the virtuous cycle of storage scaling up and prices continuing to decline. In addition to this, because of all of the car industry now jumping on board the electric car train, imagine the billions of dollars of investment going into developing cheaper batteries. By 2030, we will have seen enormous cost declines in wind generation, solar generation, and battery storage cost declines. You can look at Tony Seba and his predictions that he made all the way back in 2012, predicting exactly what would happen today. Now, Tony Seba obviously predicts the demise of hydrogen, the demise of coal, and the demise of natural gas. The reason is cost. Simple mathematics, nothing to do with governments or greenies or any kind of sanctions or anything else of that nature, subsidies. The reason is cost. Renewable energy cost continues to decline at a rapid rate that will only accelerate as the amount of renewables we have increases. By 2030, my prediction, 95% of the world's entire energy generation will be from renewables. 95% of the world's car market, not the existing fleet, market, will be 95% electric. I believe a carbon neutral world will be here very soon. I predict it will happen within 20 years maximum. Now, I'm sure there's many of you who will disagree with me, and you'll have logical and good reasons why. Tell me why. Why do you disagree? Am I right? Am I wrong? Tell me in the comments. Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching the video. Please remember to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye-bye.
We're on the cusp of the fastest, deepest, most consequential transformation of energy in 100 years. My work on disruption has shown that it's going to happen over the next 10, 15 years for purely economic reasons. You know, in 2010, when I said that the internal combustion engine automobile would be obsolete by 2030, many thought it was an insane prediction. Most thought that. I also said that the tipping point for the electric vehicle disruption would happen around 2020 or 2021. And then it would accelerate. The mainstream view was this would not happen until the 2050s or 60s. And of course, they said I was insane. Some of them are still saying that. But my numbers, the cost curves of batteries and electric vehicles and so on, were clear on how it would happen. And now, of course, we saw over the last year how Tesla broke through and became the most valuable auto company on earth. And we saw recently also that the CEO of VW said that, yes, this disruption is going to happen over the next decade, which is exactly what I said 10 years ago. And they probably wish they had paid attention to me back then. So in terms of energy, my work indicates that the convergence of solar, batteries, and wind is going to do the same thing to energy generation that electric vehicles are going to do to the internal combustion engine automobile. So let's look at my latest report. Rethinking Energy, 100% solar, wind, and batteries is just the beginning. So the question that we asked ourselves was this: is 100% solar, wind, and batteries is a system, it's an electric power system that is composed only of solar, wind, and batteries possible by 2030? So as background to that, let me show you that over the last 10 years, as most of you probably know, solar and wind both have become the cheapest sources of energy. Solar today, unsubsidized, is the cheapest source of energy, period, in history, ever, today. So this is not in the future. This is actually today. Not only that, the convergence of solar plus batteries, 4 hours of batteries, which the industry calls a nearly firm power, or wind and batteries, is already cheaper, not just than any other source of energy, it's cheaper than the operating costs of everything else. So today, it makes no sense to invest in any form of conventional generation. And on top of that, the cost curves for solar, wind, and batteries basically show that they're going to get about 70% on the whole cheaper over the next 10 years. So the cheapest source of energy is going to get 70% cheaper. Solar went down in cost by about 82%, and we expect the next decade to see 72% drop in costs. Wind went down by 46% since 2010, and we expect another 43% drop. Batteries went down by 87% in costs over the last 10 years, and we expect them to go down by another 80% over the next 10 years. So the question of whether 100% solar, wind, and batteries, what we call SWB, electric power system, basically yielded very interesting findings. Is it possible by 2030, and how much will it be? So we took real world energy generation data, generation from solar and wind. And also we took real world demand data for several markets, larger markets, India, California, Texas, New England, and so on. And we took that and we analyzed how it would grow to be 100% in those markets. The first key finding that is non-intuitive is this: there is a non-linear relationship between generation and storage. So there are thousands of possible energy systems that are along that U-curve that are 100% SWB, thousands. So it is possible. And there is a non-linear trade-off between generation and storage. So that's another key feature of disruption. This is not a one-to-one substitution where you take one coal mine, one coal power plant or nuke or whatever, and you substitute that one with solar plus storage. This is a completely new system, completely different system. So there's a nonlinear trade-off. How do you choose for the least cost system? So we did that calculation, and this red line shows what the least cost system is for several regions. And what we found was, because of that nonlinear trade-off, is that to have 100% SWB, you can do that with anywhere from 1 day to 4 days of storage. That's it. So the idea of seasonal storage, where you need weeks or maybe months of storage, is not quite right, because this is not a one-to-one substitution. So only 1 to 4 days of storage are needed, depending on the region. But to do that, you need to build capacity for solar and wind that essentially is 3 to 5 times what the demand is today. So because solar is getting to be so cheap, you can essentially build a lot more capacity in order to have less battery storage. So like I said, we did that work for many regions. And what we found was that 100% SWB, if we start 2021 and we finish it by 2030, is the cheapest possible electric power system, period. No subsidies, nothing. So if we start building a 100% SWB system today, it will be the cheapest power system. And we could stop there. I mean, in the United States, it would cost about $2 trillion to fully electrify 100% SWB, which is 1% of GDP over the next 10 years. But wait, there's more. Another key finding is that this system, because it's designed for the lowest possible combination of wind and solar resources, essentially will create super abundant, near zero marginal cost energy the rest of the year. Zero cost clean energy, super abundant the rest of the year. We call that superpower. Now, what does that mean? So for these regions, California, Texas, New England, for instance, New England has the poorest solar or wind resources in the nation. And yet, when you build a 100% SWB system, there are 63% of days when you will get more than twice the generation that you get today for free. This is extra power for free, super abundant, clean, that's superpower. In California and Texas, you get free superabundant power 93% of days. Another key finding is this: there are disproportionate returns to incremental investments in this infrastructure. So what does that mean? It means that once you have this 100% SWB system, if you invest, for instance, 20% more, you may get up to 300% more energy, more superpower. We have never seen, repeat, an extra 20% investment may get you 200, 300% more superpower. We have never seen this in resource-based energy. The existing conventional system could never, ever compete with this. To think about this in another way, this looks more like information economics. It looks like photons plus electrons basically give you disproportionate positive returns. And that's why it's so disruptive, which is another key finding. Superpower is disruptive, not just to electric power. It's disruptive to all forms of energy. So in California, for instance, when you invest in the basic 100% SWB, you get all of this additional superpower that can essentially power every single mile of transportation if every car, vehicle in California were electric for free. Did I say free? If you invest in another 20% increase in superpower, then you can cover today's electricity demand, plus transportation, electric, plus residential heat, plus commercial heat, plus some industrial heat for free. All of this is additional superpower. So this is disruptive to all forms of energy, assuming, of course, that we electrify cars and buildings and so on. And of course, every time in history we've seen cheap and abundant clean energy, we have seen prosperity. Superpower, 100% SWB, are the keys to a new prosperity, to developing new industries, and to solving the world's most intractable issues, as defined by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So let me summarize. There is a nonlinear trade-off between generation and storage. It's a U-curve, clean energy U-curve. 100% SWB is not only possible by 2030, it's the cheapest possible energy system by 2040. Superpower means that not only is it the cheapest to generate 100% of what we consume today, it's going to generate super abundant, essentially free electricity, which is disruptive to everything else. And 100% solar, wind, and batteries is just the beginning, because if you invest more, you're going to get disproportionate returns on that additional energy. Thank you.